The ECOWAS heads of state and government have agreed to continue the dialogue option while not dismantling the existing sanctions taken at the last summit. President of the ECOWAS Commission, Dr. Omar Toure, disclosed this at the end of the second extraordinary summit on the political situation in Niger Republic, held in Abuja.
Direct the Committee of the Chief of Defense Staff to activate the ECOWAS standby force with all its elements immediately. Order the deployment of the ECOWAS standby force to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger. Underscore its continued commitment to the restoration of constitutional order through peaceful means. Enforce all measures, in particular border closures and strict travel bans and assets freeze, on all persons or groups of individuals whose actions hinder all peaceful efforts aimed at ensuring the smooth and complete restoration of constitutional order. Direct the President of the Commission to monitor the implementation of the sanctions.
Also, ECOWAS has ordered the activation and deployment of a standby military force to Niger to restore constitutional order. ECOWAS also warned countries within the bloc supporting the coup leaders to stay off such actions. Meanwhile, the Niger coup leaders have announced a list of 21 persons they say will become ministers in a new transition government. Joining us now on the morning show to discuss the decision reached yesterday by ECOWAS in Abuja and the implications ahead of a possible deployment of military forces in Niger is Ambassador Ibrahim Meisule, former Nigerian ambassador to Indonesia. Ambassador, good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning and thank you very much.
Well, Ambassador Meisule, I would like to ask you, what do you think of the resolution yesterday by ECOWAS leaders at that second extraordinary summit, which came across as being contradictory? On one hand, they say they are deploying a standby force. On the other hand, they say, oh, they are still pursuing diplomacy and dialogue, even when it is clear that the coup leaders in Niger have snubbed both ECOWAS and other groups that have tried to intervene. And where is that standby force that ECOWAS is talking about? Do you see a contradiction here? Do we really have a standby force that ECOWAS can immediately deploy, as Dr. Toure said?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the honor given to me to put in my own thoughts about the whole thing. First and foremost, just like you rightly pointed out, the release appears to be a little bit contradictory. If you listen to the opening address of Mr. President, he's virtually putting more weight on the issue of diplomacy. And at the end of the day, I think when they went into a private session, and that's where this communique came out from. And if you listen to the Ivorian president, you could see obviously that he was not addressing us, because he was saying that the war is not between Nigeria and Niger, but it was a decision of ECOWAS. And if you listen to him carefully, he will tell you that the Ivorian position was what has been sold to the leaders of ECOWAS. And you know exactly where Ouattara or the Ivorian president is coming from. If you look at the history of ECOMAC, you could see there has never been a situation where they have been around us or around ECOMAC. Maybe because when we are going to Liberia, they thought Liberia being a British colony, I mean not a French colony, so they don't really care. But the basic issue is one has to be extremely careful with these sit-tight leaders. Because obviously the coup is not only the idea of military taking over government. A coup is actually where people extend their limit beyond what constitutionally is being provided for. That one is also a coup. When you rig yourself into an election, it's also a coup. So basically the problem with these leaders is I am right, everybody else is wrong. Because one has to look seriously into the kind of thing that this guy is saying. And my fears are that we shouldn't allow these people to take us into another proxy war. Proxy war in the sense is that in Niger, the Wagner, the missionary groups of Russia are already there. And these people who are from the East is because Niger, Mali, and others are saying they are tired with the domination of French in the running affairs of their own country, so they want to be really independent. They have been telling us that you are more independent than us because our own independence is only a name. Our currency is being printed somewhere, and then the central bank of another country is the one that takes care of our own money. You go back, you take loan from your own money, and you pay interest. There are so many things that are going wrong. And I can't see people like Ouattara have the moral right to start telling people that this issue is not Nigeria and Niger. As far back as the 18th century when the Sultanate was established, there has been a very good cordial relationship between the two countries. And a number of Nigerian leaders happens to belong to the two countries. Nigeria recognized in dual citizenship. There are a number of Nigerian leaders that are partly here and partly there. So I can't see anybody who is telling us that if there is going to be a war, even if we are not around neighbors, with Niger, one will say it is not a war between us. It is actually a war between us because there are a number of Nigerians that are going to be affected as a result of that war. So I can see a contradiction in the release itself because I believe the leadership, who happens to be our own leader, seems to be focusing more on diplomacy based on the missionaries that he has sent around. The former president was there together with the Sultan of Sokoto. Nobody seemed to know what has actually happened. And you see, you cannot really negotiate with the threat. The first thing that's made it very difficult for people to start thinking about this negotiation was the fact that you took a decision, cut off light, close the borders and what have you. You have a negotiation, you cannot negotiate with somebody on the basis of a threat. You should first negotiate. It is only when the negotiation fails that you think about what happened again. So I believe basically there is a lot of contradiction in the release itself. Two, I'm sure we should not allow this country to go into a proxy war between the West and Russia, because at the end of the day, if you look at what is happening in Ukraine, if you look at what is happening in Sudan, and in quite a lot of places you see around Libya that has virtually finished, you can see basically is this idea of pushing people to do certain biddings. And they use some of these sit-tight leaders to sell their own ideas around. And if you look at the background of Ouattara and what you see, virtually you find out that even when he was talking, you can know exactly he was not trying to report to people that this is what has happened. It was the decision or the ideas of a Ivorian government that has been sold to the Economic Community of West Africa.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador Maysule. I have two questions for you. The first question is, the communique from the ECOWAS summit says that they will explore all diplomatic options, and if that's exhausted, then they'll have to use military force. No timeline was given or indicators as to what would mean exhaustion of diplomatic options. At what point in situations like this would all diplomatic options be said to have been exhausted? Because as you've mentioned, and a number of people have said, we don't want to go to, Nigerians have expressed that they're not in support of going to war with Niger or applying military force. So at what point should we be looking at? Is there some form of timeline which wasn't communicated or indications that Niger is ready for dialogue or dialogue has been successful? For the second question, I would like you to comment on Professor Usman Yusuf's take that a declaration of war against Niger is tantamount to a declaration of war against the North, that's northern Nigeria. And that the North are tired of war. They've been in war with Boko Haram, some form of war with Boko Haram for many years, and they just want peace. What's your take on this?
Now let me start from the last one. There is no country in the ECOWAS community that has been with us at the time of our needs more than Niger. This happened during the Nigerian Civil War. It's happened even recently during the Boko Haram and what have you. They are the only ones that fall on us when there is a need for any one of them to help us. The idea of a time limit in negotiations, it all depends upon the approach. We started it in the wrong way because you cannot actually start threatening people and then you start talking about negotiation initially. You should have done the negotiation first and then you can decide what to do next. But you said cut off light. And you could look at the history of the light, that there was a dam that was supposed to be done in Nigeria, which was stopped so that they would be able to get the light from Nigeria. And definitely, if that dam has been put in place, Kainji is going to suffer. The power generation in this country will definitely going to come down. All these implications have not been sort of when people were taking hurried decisions. So obviously, there is the need of negotiation, and I'm sure with the kind of people that have been put in front, the negotiations, there is nobody who is in the right sense who will think about it, looking at what happens with the other countries around us. Take recently the issue of Ukraine, just like I mentioned earlier. Take the issue of Sudan that I mentioned, and quite a number of them. Libya, as I said, is already a gone country, and nobody will take that kind of a mistake. And in Nigeria, the worst part of it, especially the 7 states that border Nigeria, there's too much intermarriages and relationship between them, including Kano, which is actually not bordering Nigeria, but Kano and Daura is virtually close by. So if you look at the population of those states, there is a need for being very cautious before you take certain decisions of going into. And I'm definitely sure that if you go along with the diplomacy, something positive is going to be achieved. The junta group may calm down, and Nigerians are also going to calm down, or ECOWAS itself will going to calm down, and then there will be a meeting point somewhere. But going to is something that we should not think about it for now.
Okay, real quickly, a couple of things. We had Emir Sanusi talk to the Nigerian authorities a couple of days ago. What's the possibility of extending that conversation? And let's also talk timelines. Is it realistic that Bazoum will come back? Some experts have posted that it's almost impossible, that the best we can get out of this conversation is a timeline for transition to civilian rule again in Niger, which had been done before. You know, when you look at the last coup during the time of Mamadou Tandja, when he was about to go for 3 terms, somebody stepped in, did a coup, and they had a transition period for about a year.
You see, just like you rightly pointed out, what one was thinking of, ECO should have gone holistic. There are a number of military governments within ECO's rise now. You have Mali, you have Burkina Faso, and what have you. So you start thinking about how to stop it in the future occurrences. This has already happened, but the only thing is how to stop it. But as people actually said, once a coup lasts for over 24 hours, then it's difficult to ask these people to go back and restore the then government that they have already toppled. Look at the threat they are now given, that if you move into their own country, they are definitely going to kill him. So if you kill him, whom else are you going to throw in again? So the idea is to find a way out and then think seriously of how you can go into restore democracy in a more peaceful manner.
Well, Ambassador, let me ask you. President Tinubu keeps quoting ECOWAS resolutions. That was what you referred to when he approached the Senate to give the presidency powers to implement ECOWAS resolutions. Now, are ECOWAS resolutions superior to the Nigerian constitutional process, even when Section 12 of the 1999 Constitution says treaties, protocols, conventions will have to be domesticated for them to have the force of law? Can the president act on the basis of ECOWAS resolutions, even when the Senate has advised him not to commit Nigerian troops to any act of military intervention?
My brother, you all know that the primary responsibilities for the president is to Nigeria and Nigerians. That is actually why he's voted for. The whole essence of government is to provide security for life and property. So obviously, once you get out of this one, his own responsibility is to Nigeria and Nigerians. And that's exactly what it is, and that's why he's been voted for. ECO since has to have gone back to the representative. There is no way that he can take a decision without going through the National Assembly. The issue is that I'm not sure if there is going to be any stand force already on the ground. It's going to be a combination of soldiers coming out from different countries. I'm not sure if there is any standby force, just like a number of our colleagues have already stated earlier. So I believe the essence is the whole thing will go back to the National Assembly. In the real sense, one has to rely on the National Assembly to put a proper microscope on the activities of the executive arm of the government so far.
All right. Earlier you had said, Ambassador, that perhaps ECOWAS position and the sanctions imposed in Niger was not the right way to go in terms of, and then how they talked of initially, if you're going to explore diplomatic options, then it should start with diplomatic options, and body language and even communication is very important. Now, they said that, some sources say that the military junta in Niger are asking that these sanctions are reversed. What's your take on this? Even though ECOWAS yesterday concluded that they were still going to go ahead with enforcing the sanctions that are already being imposed in Niger, what would you suggest? Should there be some form of middle ground with the request from the junta in terms of let's slow down with the force and the sanctions and explore and come to the dialogue table fully and in terms of diplomacy?
I know there are some organizations have already written and have already made up their own position. First, you have to lose the tensions, open the border, and secondly, restore the power supply. Because as I said earlier, this issue of power supply is going to affect us if they continue with their dam project, because it is going to affect Jaba. And definitely it is going to bring down the power generation of the entire country. And who is going to be a loser? Is it Nigeria or ECOWAS? So obviously, as soon as you go on with the negotiation, with the diplomatic discussions, there is going to be a way out that the two of them can come together and something amiable and amicable can come out of those discussions. But what actually took place initially was that you do the threat, you do the sanctions before you even start the negotiation. It is after those discussions that you send emissaries to Niger, and then some people decided on their own, looking at the risk that this country is going to get in to try to get themselves involved. And that's, even at that level, you can see there is some kind of approach, because Emir Sunusi was allowed to see the head of the junta. He was carried by one of the respected emirs, the emir of the Wagram over there. So obviously, some movement is going ahead. A government has been formed. The prime minister is a civilian. Obviously, there is going to be a way of having a discussion that we can go somewhere. But we'll have to look seriously into putting down the military action for now.
So concerning the dam issue, there's been a kickback, and I got a message here that saying that, but Niger first broke that agreement as regards the dam by building a dam on the upper Niger. Can you throw more light on that?
I don't think they are building. I know they are yes, I know they are building it, but I know they have a problem with it. It doesn't move anywhere. I know they started it, and I was made to understand there was a negotiation, and then they didn't stop. I don't know the situation as it is now, but I knew at one time they started the whole idea, and then they were reminded of that initial agreement, and it was stopped. But I'm not sure whether it is already on.
But for them to build a dam on the upper Niger...
People around the Jeba have not complained about it.
Okay, so for them to even start building despite the agreements, is it not that Niger has broken the agreement in the first place?
No, there's no doubt about it, but that's why I'm saying that maybe there must have been a reason for it, but there was an intervention, and as a result of that intervention, the thing was, I was made to understand that it stopped. I don't know what it is the situation now.
Okay.
In any case, I keep pushing, whether they block they build their hydro dam or not. We get just about 15% of electricity supply in Nigeria from hydro. Kanji, Shiroro, and Jeba. So really, 85% of our electricity here comes from, thermal stations.
From gas.
Yes, but that's not beside the point. Don Corleone, in Mario Puzo's The Godfather, says, never begin in any negotiation with a threat. Do you think that ECOWAS leaders boss themselves...
on the same wavelength.
Hello? You were saying something?
I said you're on the same
Hello, I'm hearing you.
Okay, so...
I say we are on the same wavelength. We are going to...
Yes. So do you think that ECOWAS leaders, in fact, mismanage this entire process by boxing themselves into a corner, starting with a threat and compelling the coup leaders and their allies in Guinea-Conakry, Mali, and Burkina Faso by starting with threats? How do they work their way back now if military intervention will not work?
Yeah, I think there has to be a kind of an approach. You may need to talk to other... You see, the problem we have is that those bordering Niger, if you take away Nigeria and you find out that on the top is Libya and Algeria, And all of them are not even with us. The actual ECOWAS countries are around. Very few of them are bordering Niger closely like the way we do. And none of them had the kind of length of distance between them. As I said, it covers about 8 states, including Kano. Though Kano is not directly linked to Niger, but Kano and Dora is not far away from one another. So I think there is the need for this diplomacy, and I'm sure as a result of that, something is going to be achieved. These two discussions that has been done by a number of people, and I know there are a number of people that are doing their own silently. So everybody doesn't want to create any war because everybody has seen the repercussion of wars in the other countries that have gone through. It's going to actually come down to our city rooms. It's not going to be at the border. You cannot think about war in Niger around the area and you think places like Dora and others are going to be safe. At the end of the day, it is going to be in our own city room. So obviously everybody is concerned to make sure that we don't go into war and something come out of it peaceful so that at least people should go through their normal life.
Well, I have a question, just a bit more general in terms of how do we prevent coups in West Africa, in Africa? I mean, one of the reasons why the ECOWAS bloc isn't taking the Nigerian coup lightly is because of the spate of coups in this region in the last 3 years and the fact that they cannot afford for another one, another successful coup without addressing it decisively. However, this also brings up the question as to why do coups occur? Especially with regards to, as you already alluded to, a challenge on the Constitution with regards to sometimes internal issues where leaders keep extending their terms in office. Some of these leaders were at the summit yesterday. So it's interesting there. How do we prevent, how do we have conversations like this so that we do not have a repeat of what's going on in Niger, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea?
Good governance, strict adherence to constitutions. And once that has been there, and then you start thinking about providing the basic needs of people's life. If that is being put in place, the people will react. It has happened in Turkey. There was a coup, and it was the people that really went into the armored vehicle themselves and worked against the coup. So obviously, if there is a good governance on the ground and there is adherence to the constitution of the country, the issue of coup will be handled by the people, by the populace themselves. But in a situation where people have got in extended terms or rigged the election into office, and at the same time, people are really in a very bad situation themselves. So you cannot see the people reacting to defend the government themselves because they don't feel the government is for them. But once there is a good governance, and then there is adherence to constitutions, people will definitely go and stop it themselves. And as I said, you can see it happened in Turkey, and people brought it down.
All right, but we had an ambassador yesterday, Ambassador Ali, who said that in assessing Bazoum's governance, that it was credible, it was good, that UN statistics or UN figures shows that he was doing something good in Niger. However, this could still happen. I'd like your assessment on his government. And are there instances where people, it's just for selfish interest when it comes to coups?
No, in actual fact, in some cases, as I said, there is the need of good governance on the ground. But in some cases, it depends upon the diversity. Whatever you do, the other side will say, we have not done well. But you should do it at the dictate of your conscience. I gave you an example of a country. The one that was a coup, he was outside the country, but the people reacted and the government was brought back. So you see, the issue is that it has to touch virtually everybody. And once that is being done, it is okay.
But Ambassador, you and I cannot use Turkey as a very firm example because there's also another school of thought that says that Erdogan wanted to purge his opponents in Fethullah Gulen and he wanted to purge that group out. That the question is, did the coup truly even happen in the first place? I mean, let's not use Turkey. But I'd like to ask you, I'd like to ask you a question. What is good governance in your estimation, in your analysis? What does good governance mean? Because it's a big contention. In fact, we're having this debate yesterday. What is good governance?
Then what is there except providing the basic needs of society? What do average Nigerian needs? To eat, to go to hospital, his children to go to school, and the resources in the country can provide that. And then adherence to the constitutional provisions. People trying to extend their tenures unnecessarily. So obviously, these are the kind of people that, that like most military people will say that once you see a coup, then there is a basic move from the society that they are tired with their government, and that's why the military will take advantage. There is a failure somewhere before they take advantage.
Okay.
I agree. Turkey thing can be a different thing, but it happened the way it is. Whether it was arranged or whatever, it can happen anywhere. Because I knew there was a coup in Nigeria that was stopped.
Well, Ambassador, one of the lines in the communique read by Dr. Toure is that ECOWAS is calling on the international community and its partners to support the immediate deployment of a standby force to Niger. What do you think is likely to be the response of those partners, particularly the AU and the United Nations, which, by the way, has also expressed concern about developments in Niger?
You see, when you talk about United Nations, you cannot avoid mentioning United States. United States and France have got their own base in Turkey when this coup was taking place, and nothing happened. They didn't do anything to stop it. So obviously, they have got their own vested interest. And in France, you can see the kind of thing that is happening. In Mali, in Niger, they are trying to at least term themselves their own independent with the way things are going, even if it has not started in the legal way. So obviously, France will be one of those people that can really push forward the idea of war and what have you, so that they can get back their ego. I think it is very important for us to realize that we need to work as a team, and we need to avoid a situation where we'll look back and find out that we're really going to say, if I had known, it would have been an afterthought. There is nowhere that any war took place in the recent years that people have not regretted.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador May Soulé, for joining us on the morning show today.